In the hills of Malibu, a killer believed he had committed the perfect crime. No fingerprints, no DNA, no human witnesses. But what he didn't count on was a four-legged witness whose memory was more accurate than any security camera, and whose loyalty would become his ultimate downfall. This is the story of how a brilliant mind outsmarted an entire police force, only to be defeated by something as simple as a dog's bark. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine white walls of Marcus Thornfield's Malibu mansion when Elena Vasquez discovered what would become Los Angeles' most baffling murder case. Her scream pierced the Pacific breeze at exactly 7:43 a.m., echoing through the $8 million estate that overlooked the endless blue of the California coast. Marcus Thornfield, 45, tech entrepreneur and CEO of Thornfield Industries, lay sprawled across his marble foyer floor. Blood had pooled beneath his head, creating a dark crimson stain that contrasted sharply with the pristine white Italian marble. His lifeless eyes stared at the crystal chandelier above, as if questioning how his empire had crumbled in a single night. Elena's trembling fingers dialed 911, her voice barely coherent as she reported the scene. Within minutes, the quiet residential street filled with the urgent wails of sirens, and the mansion became a hive of activity. Crime scene technicians moved with practiced precision, photographing every angle, measuring blood, spatter patterns, and dusting for fingerprints on surfaces that gleamed with an almost mocking cleanliness. Detective Isabella Reyes arrived at 8:15 a.m., her experienced eyes immediately scanning the scene with the methodical approach that had made her one of LAPD's most respected investigators. At 38, she had seen enough crime scenes to know when something felt wrong, and this one practically screamed deception. The house was too clean, too organized for a burglary gone wrong. "What do we have?" she asked Officer Jake Morrison, who had been first on the scene after the uniforms. "Appears to be a break-in, Detective. Victim is Marcus Thornfield, tech mogul. Housekeeper found him this morning. No signs of forced entry, which is strange. Some valuables are missing, jewelry, cash, a laptop." But Reyes noticed what others had missed. The supposedly ransacked study showed signs of selective searching. Important documents were scattered, but expensive electronics remained untouched. A $50,000 Rolex lay forgotten on the kitchen counter, while a far less valuable watch was missing from the bedroom. Then she heard it, a sound that would prove to be the key to everything. From the garage came the persistent, agitated barking of what she would soon learn was Rex, Thornfield's 3-year-old German Shepherd. The dog's barks weren't random. They followed a specific pattern, almost rhythmic, as if trying to communicate something urgent. "Why is the dog locked in the garage?" Reyes asked Elena, who was being comforted by a neighbor. I don't know," Elena stammered through her tears. "Rex always sleeps in Mr. Thornfield's bedroom. He never goes in the garage." "Never." Reyes made her way to the garage, where she found Rex pacing frantically. The moment she opened the door, the massive German Shepherd bolted past her, heading straight for the foyer where his master's body lay. But instead of approaching the corpse, Rex ran to a specific spot near the front door, sniffing intensely and barking with renewed urgency. The forensics team found nothing unusual about that particular area, but Reyes made a mental note. In her 15 years of detective work, she had learned that the smallest details often held the biggest secrets, and Rex's behavior was anything but small. It was a glaring inconsistency in what otherwise appeared to be a flawlessly executed crime. As the morning progressed, the evidence painted a frustrating picture of perfection. No fingerprints on any surface that mattered, no DNA evidence, no signs of struggle. The killer had worn gloves, shoe covers, and had been methodical enough to clean up after themselves. Security cameras had been disabled with professional precision, their memory cards removed without damaging the systems. But Reyes couldn't shake the image of Rex's desperate barking, the way the dog seemed to be trying to tell them something that no human witness could. As she watched the German Shepherd finally settle beside his deceased master, she realized she was looking at the only living being who had witnessed the crime. The question was, how do you get a dog to testify? Dr. Adrian Blackwood arrived at the crime scene with the kind of composed urgency that spoke of a man accustomed to life and death situations. At 52, the renowned neurosurgeon carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades making split-second decisions in operating rooms. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and his expensive suit showed no signs of the emotional turmoil one might expect from a business partner discovering his colleague's murder. "I came as soon as I heard," Blackwood told Detective Reyes, his voice steady but appropriately somber. "Marcus was more than a business partner. He was like a brother to me." Reyes studied his face carefully. In her experience, the people closest to victims often knew more than they initially revealed, whether consciously or not. "When did you last see Mr. Thornfield?" 3 days ago, at our office. We were reviewing the final details of our Neuralink project before I left for San Francisco. Blackwood's answer came without hesitation, the mark of either complete honesty or well-rehearsed deception. The Neuralink project, as Blackwood explained, was a revolutionary brain-computer interface that Thornfield Industries had been developing in partnership with Blackwood's Medical Research Foundation. The technology promised to help paralyzed patients control devices with their thoughts, a breakthrough worth an estimated $50 million in initial contracts alone. "Were there any problems with the partnership?" Reyes asked, noting how Blackwood's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Business partnerships always have their tensions, Detective. Marcus could be demanding, perfectionist, but nothing that would lead to this." Blackwood gestured toward the foyer where chalk now outlined where Thornfield's body had been found. Officer Morrison joined them, carrying a tablet with preliminary information. "Doctor, we need to verify your whereabouts for the past 48 hours. Blackwood pulled out his phone with the efficiency of someone accustomed to providing alibis. "I've been in San Francisco since Tuesday morning, the annual neurosurgical conference at the Moscone Center. I can provide you with my hotel registration conference badge, and I delivered a keynote address to over 300 attendees yesterday evening." The alibi was airtight, too airtight perhaps. Reyes had seen guilty parties with solid alibis before, but rarely ones this thoroughly documented. Conference schedules, hotel keycard records, restaurant receipts, even photos with colleagues throughout the 3-day event. If Blackwood was lying, he had planned this alibi with surgical precision. "I assume you'll want to search Marcus's office," Blackwood offered, reaching into his jacket. "I have keys to our shared workspace. Whatever you need to solve this, Detective, Marcus deserves justice." As they walked through the mansion, Blackwood provided insights that seemed genuinely helpful. He pointed out which items were truly valuable versus mere replicas, explained Thornfield's daily routines, and even offered to help contact business associates who might have relevant information. But it was Rex's reaction to Blackwood that caught Reyes's attention. The German shepherd, who had been following the detective closely, suddenly became alert when Blackwood spoke. Not aggressive exactly, but focused. The dog's ears perked up, his head tilted, and he began that same rhythmic barking pattern from earlier. "Rex seems agitated," Reyes observed. "Dogs can sense emotional distress," Blackwood replied smoothly. "He's probably picking up on our stress about Marcus. I'm sure this is traumatic for him." The explanation was logical, but something about Blackwood's tone felt rehearsed. Reyes made another mental note as Rex continued his unusual barking sequence. Later, as they examined Thornfield's home office, Blackwood's medical expertise proved invaluable. He explained the significance of various prescription medications they found, clarified medical reports related to their research, and helped identify which business documents might be relevant to the investigation. Marcus had been receiving death threats, Blackwood mentioned casually, almost as an afterthought. "Nothing serious, we thought. Disgruntled former employees, competitors trying to intimidate us, but maybe we should have taken them more seriously." This revelation opened new avenues of investigation, but Reyes noticed how Blackwood had waited until now to mention it. In her experience, helpful witnesses who held back crucial information usually had reasons for their selective memory. As the afternoon wore on, Blackwood's helpfulness became almost overwhelming. He offered to stay in Los Angeles to assist with the investigation, volunteered to provide financial records, and even suggested potential suspects among their business rivals. "There's something else," Blackwood said as Reyes prepared to leave. "Marcus had been paranoid lately. Thought someone was watching him, following him. I told him it was stress from the project deadline. But now..." The picture Blackwood painted was of a brilliant but increasingly unstable partner, a man whose paranoia might have led him to take dangerous risks or confront the wrong people. It was a narrative that would explain the murder while directing suspicion away from those closest to the victim. But as Reyes drove back to the station, She couldn't forget Rex's reaction to Blackwood's voice. Dogs didn't lie, didn't have ulterior motives, and rarely showed interest in strangers unless there was a reason. The question was, what did Rex know that the humans didn't? The LAPD's West Bureau station buzzed with the controlled chaos of a high-profile murder investigation. Detective Reyes spread crime scene photos across her desk, while Officer Morrison brought in their first round of potential suspects, each carrying secrets that would complicate what initially appeared to be a straightforward burglary. Elena Vasquez sat in interview room 2, her hands still trembling as she recounted the morning's discovery. At 34, she had worked for Marcus Thornfield for 3 years, cleaning his mansion twice weekly and caring for Rex when Thornfield traveled. Her story was consistent, but her financial situation painted a different picture. "Elena, we found notices of eviction in your car," Reyes said gently. 3 months behind on rent, credit cards maxed out. That's a lot of pressure. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Thornfield was helping me. He advanced my salary, gave me extra work. Why would I hurt the man who was saving my family?" But the financial records told a more complex story. Eleanor owed $15,000 to various creditors, and Thornfield's assistance had been minimal compared to her debts. She had keys to the house, knew Thornfield's routines, and had access to the security system codes. "Where were you Tuesday night between 9 p.m. and midnight?" Morrison asked. "Home with my children. My mother was there too. We watched telenovelas. Until late. The alibi would need verification, but Elena's emotional responses seemed genuine. Reyes had interviewed enough guilty parties to recognize the difference between grief and guilt, and Elena appeared to be experiencing pure shock. Their second suspect presented a stark contrast. Thomas Chen, 28, former head of cybersecurity at Thornfield Industries, carried himself with the bitter confidence of someone who believed he had been wronged. Fired 6 months earlier for allegedly stealing proprietary code, Chen had immediately joined a competing firm. "Thornfield destroyed my reputation," Chen said coldly. "Blacklisted me from half the tech companies in California. But killing him, that would be stupid. And I'm not stupid." Chen's alibi was digital and supposedly ironclad. Server logs showed him working remotely from his apartment Tuesday night, uploading code and participating in online meetings with colleagues in different time zones. His keycard had accessed his new office building at 7 a.m. Wednesday morning, and security cameras confirmed his presence. "These logs can be faked," Morrison pointed out, "by someone with my skills." "Absolutely. But why would I fake being at work when I could fake being anywhere else? If I wanted to kill Thornfield, I'd make sure I had an alibi that didn't involve being at a computer all night." The logic was sound, but Chen's technical expertise made him capable of sophisticated deception. More concerning was his detailed knowledge of Thornfield's security systems, which he had helped design and install. Their third suspect emerged from the world of corporate espionage. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Synapse Technologies, Thornfield Industries' primary competitor in the brain-computer interface market. Her company stood to gain millions if the Neuralink project failed, and intelligence reports suggested she had been attempting to poach Thornfield's key researchers. Sterling arrived with 2 lawyers and an attitude that made clear she considered the interview an inconvenience rather than a civic duty. At 45, she commanded her interrogation with the same ruthless efficiency that had built her company into a tech empire. Marcus Thornfield was a visionary, but he was also naive about business realities, she said. "His death is a tragedy for the entire industry." "Where were you Tuesday night?" Reyes asked. "At a charity gala at the Beverly Hills Hotel. 500 witnesses, including the mayor and half of Hollywood's elite. I gave a speech about women in technology that was broadcast live on 3 networks. The alibi was public and verifiable, but Sterling's resources could have enabled her to hire professional killers. The interview revealed her intimate knowledge of Thornfield's work, his partnerships, and even his personal habits. "Did you know about problems between Thornfield and Dr. Blackwood?" Reyes asked. For the first time, Sterling's composure cracked slightly. "Adrian is brilliant but complicated. There were rumors about disagreements over the direction of their research. Marcus wanted to focus on medical applications, while Adrian was more interested in the commercial potential. This contradicted Blackwood's portrayal of their partnership as harmonious, adding another layer to the investigation's growing complexity. As the day progressed, more suspects emerged from Thornfield's complicated life. A disgruntled investor who had lost millions on a failed project, a former romantic partner who had been harassing him for months, even his own brother, who stood to inherit a significant portion of the estate. Each suspect had motives, opportunities, and alibis that ranged from solid to suspicious. But what troubled Reyes most was how each interview seemed to circle back to the same theme. Marcus Thornfield had been a man with many enemies and few true friends, except for Rex. As evening approached, Reyes returned to the mansion to collect additional evidence. She found Rex lying in his master's bedroom, still and quiet for the first time since the murder. But when she played recordings of the day's interviews on her phone, the dog's reaction was immediate and specific. Elena's voice produced no response. Chen's voice made Rex lift his head but remain calm. Sterling's voice caused mild interest, but when Dr. Blackwood's voice filled the room from the recording, Rex jumped to his feet and began that same urgent rhythmic barking pattern that had puzzled everyone at the crime scene. The dog knew something. The question was, how could she make anyone else believe it? Dr. Sarah Kim had spent 15 years studying animal behavior at UCLA, but she had never been asked to help solve a murder case. When Detective Reyes called her on Thursday morning, explaining that a dog's testimony might be crucial to a homicide investigation, Kim's first instinct was to politely decline what sounded like a desperate investigator, grasping at straws, but something in Reyes's voice convinced her to visit the Thornfield mansion that afternoon, bringing along her portable monitoring equipment and a colleague who specialized in canine psychology. "I need you to understand that dogs don't lie," Reyes explained, as they watched Rex pace the foyer. "They can't manipulate evidence or create false alibis. Whatever Rex is trying to tell us, it's the truth." Kim observed the German Shepherd's behavior patterns while her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, set up audio recording equipment. Rex's agitation wasn't random. It followed specific triggers that corresponded to certain locations in the house and specific sounds. "Dogs have internal clocks that are remarkably precise," Kim explained, "more accurate than most humans realize. Rex's routine with his owner would have been predictable to the minute. Any disruption to that routine would register as significant." They began by establishing Rex's normal behavioral patterns. Eleanor confirmed that Rex always slept in Thornfield's bedroom, never in the garage. The dog's evening routine was consistent: dinner at 6 p.m., a walk around the property at 7 p.m., then staying close to Thornfield until bedtime around 11 p.m. "So, if Rex was locked in the garage," Webb observed, "something interrupted that routine at a specific time. But it was Rex's reaction to voices that provided the breakthrough." Kim had brought recordings of various sounds, doorbells, car engines, footsteps, to test the dog's responses. Rex showed mild interest in most sounds, but became intensely focused when they played recordings of human voices. "Let's try something different," Reyes suggested, playing audio from her interviews with the suspects. Rex's responses were dramatically different for each voice. Elena's voice calmed him. Chen's voice made him alert, but not agitated. Other suspects' voices produced mild interest or indifference, but when Dr. Blackwood's voice filled the room, Rex's transformation was immediate and unmistakable. The dog jumped to his feet, ran to the front door area where he had been frantically sniffing the day before, and began barking in that same rhythmic pattern. "That's not fear," Webb observed. "That's recognition, excited recognition." Kim nodded in agreement. "Rex knows that voice. Not just knows it, has positive associations with it. Look at his body language. Tail wagging, ears forward, but urgent barking. He's trying to communicate something specific about this person." They tested the theory multiple times with different recordings of Blackwood's voice, including his conference presentation from San Francisco. Each time, Rex's response was identical: excited recognition, followed by urgent communication attempts. "Here's what I think happened," Kim said, watching Rex's behavior. "Based on his routine, Rex should have encountered the killer during his normal evening schedule. But instead of showing fear or aggression, which dogs typically display toward intruders, Rex is showing recognition and urgency, meaning the killer wasn't a stranger," Reyes concluded. "More than that, Rex's behavior suggests this person was familiar enough to be trusted, but their presence at an unusual time created confusion and anxiety. Dogs are creatures of routine. When someone they know appears outside their normal context, it registers as significant." Webb had been analyzing the barking patterns on his equipment. "Detective, look at this." Rex's barking follows a specific rhythm: 3 short barks, pause, 2 long barks, pause, repeat. It's consistent every time he hears Blackwood's voice. Could that mean something? It could be his attempt to recreate a sound he heard during the incident. Dogs often try to mimic sounds that made strong impressions on them. Kim ran additional tests, playing recordings of Blackwood's voice at different volumes and speeds. Rex's response remained consistent, but when they slowed down one of Blackwood's recorded statements, something remarkable happened. The rhythm of Blackwood's speech pattern, the natural pauses, emphasis, and cadence, matched Rex's barking sequence almost perfectly. Rex is trying to reproduce something Blackwood said, Kim realized, something he heard that night. But the most compelling evidence came when they tested Rex's internal clock. Kim had brought treats that Rex had never encountered before, establishing a new routine over several hours. The dog adapted quickly, anticipating treat times within a 2-minute window. Dogs can track time with incredible precision, Kim explained. Rex would know exactly when Thornfield's normal routine was disrupted and by how much. They reconstructed Tuesday evening based on Rex's behavioral patterns and Elena's knowledge of the routine. Thornfield typically had dinner alone at 6 p.m., took Rex for a walk at 7 p.m., then worked in his study until 11 p.m. when they both went to bed. But Rex's agitation suggested the routine had been interrupted much earlier than the estimated time of death. The dog's behavior indicated that something significant had happened around 8 p.m., 3 hours before the medical examiner's preliminary time of death estimate. "That's impossible," Officer Morrison said when Reyes shared the findings. Blackwood was giving his keynote speech in San Francisco at 8 p.m. Tuesday. "We have video evidence." But Kim's analysis suggested that Rex had encountered someone he knew well at 8 p.m. Tuesday evening, someone whose presence was unusual enough to disrupt the dog's normal routine, but familiar enough not to trigger a defensive response. "There's one more test I'd like to try," Kim said. "It's unconventional, but it might provide the evidence you need." She explained that dogs could be trained to indicate specific time periods through behavioral conditioning. By working with Rex over the next few hours, they might be able to determine more precisely when the disruption occurred. The process was painstaking, but Rex proved to be remarkably responsive. Using treats and positive reinforcement, Kim taught the dog to indicate different time periods by moving to different locations in the house. When asked to show when the bad thing happened, Rex consistently moved to the foyer area around what would correspond to 8 p.m. But when asked to show when the scary thing happened, Rex moved to his master's bedroom area, corresponding to much later in the evening. "Two separate incidents," Webb concluded. "Something familiar but disruptive at 8 p.m., something frightening much later." As the pieces fell into place, Reyes realized they weren't just dealing with a murder. They were looking at a crime that had been carefully staged across multiple hours, with the killer using their familiarity with both Thornfield and Rex to execute a plan that should have been perfect. The only flaw in the plan was underestimating the most reliable witness of all, a loyal dog whose memory was more precise than any human alibi and whose honesty was beyond question. Rex had been trying to tell them the truth from the beginning. Now they finally knew how to listen. The confrontation took place in the same conference room where Dr. Adrian Blackwood had first presented his airtight alibi. But now, 72 hours later, Detective Reyes sat across from him with evidence that would shatter his carefully constructed facade. "Dr. Blackwood, we need to discuss some inconsistencies in your statement," Reyes began, her voice calm but carrying the weight of certainty. Blackwood maintained his composed demeanor, but Reyes noticed the subtle signs of stress, the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible increase in his breathing rate. After decades of performing under pressure in operating rooms, Blackwood was skilled at controlling his physical responses, but not perfectly. "I'm happy to clarify anything, Detective. As I've said from the beginning, I want to help find Marcus's killer. Tell me about your relationship with Rex." The question seemed to catch Blackwood off guard, the first crack in his composure. "Rex? Thornfield's dog? We were acquainted, of course. I visited the house occasionally for business meetings." "Just occasionally?" "Well, perhaps more frequently in recent months. The Neuralink project required considerable collaboration." Reyes placed a tablet on the table, showing video footage from the animal behavior tests. "Rex knows you very well, Doctor. Well enough to recognize your voice immediately. Well enough to become excited when he hears you speak. That suggests regular positive interactions over an extended period. Blackwood watched the footage of Rex's enthusiastic response to his recorded voice. Dogs are unpredictable. I'm sure he reacts that way to many people. Actually, he doesn't. We tested him with dozens of voices. Yours is the only one that produces this specific response pattern. Reyes switched to another video. Notice anything about Rex's barking rhythm? For the first time, Blackwood's composure faltered completely. The rhythmic barking pattern playing from the tablet matched the natural cadence of his own speech patterns with uncanny precision. Rex is trying to reproduce something you said to him Tuesday night, Reyes continued. Something that made such a strong impression that he's been attempting to communicate it ever since. This is absurd. I was in San Francisco. You've verified my alibi multiple times. Your physical alibi, yes. But here's what we think happened. Reyes leaned forward. You visited Thornfield Tuesday evening around 8 p.m. Rex was happy to see you. No alarm, no defensive behavior. You had a conversation with Marcus, probably about business, probably heated. Rex heard you argue, heard specific words or phrases that he's now trying to recreate. Blackwood's hands, which had remained steady throughout the interview, began to tremble slightly. Even if I had visited Marcus, which I didn't, that wouldn't make me a killer. You're right, but your medical knowledge would. You understand how to manipulate. Time of death, how to use drugs to incapacitate someone, how to stage a scene to mislead investigators. Reyes opened a file folder. We found traces of succinylcholine in Marcus's blood, a paralytic drug that would be nearly undetectable after several hours. It's primarily used in surgical procedures. Hundreds of medical professionals have access to that drug, but not hundreds of medical professionals who were arguing with Marcus Thornfield at 8 p.m. Tuesday evening and had the expertise to manipulate the crime scene timing. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Blackwood stared at the tablet screen where Rex's video testimony played on repeat. 3 short barks, pause, 2 long barks, pause. You used your surgical knowledge to create a window of time, Reyes continued. You incapacitated Marcus around 8 p.m., staged the burglary scene, then left for your conference, knowing the drug would wear off hours later when Marcus was alone. But you didn't account for Rex's memory, his ability to mark time more precisely than any human witness. Blackwood's facade finally crumbled completely. His shoulders sagged, and when he looked up, the confident surgeon had been replaced by a man carrying an enormous burden of guilt. You don't understand, he said quietly. Marcus wasn't the man everyone thought he was. The Neuralink project, he was going to weaponize it, sell the technology to military contractors, use it for surveillance control. I couldn't let that happen. So you killed him. I tried to reason with him first. That's what Rex heard. Me pleading with Marcus to reconsider, to remember why we started this project. But Marcus had already made deals, signed contracts. He said if I tried to stop him, he'd destroy my career, my reputation, everything I'd worked for. The confessions spilled out in a rush of words and emotions that Blackwood had been suppressing for days. I never intended to kill him. The drug was supposed to just incapacitate him long enough for me to steal the project files, disappear with the research. But something went wrong. The dosage, his reaction. By the time I returned from San Francisco, it was too late. But you didn't return from San Francisco. Your alibi shows you were there until Thursday morning. Blackwood smiled bitterly. Medical conferences are easy to manipulate when you're a keynote speaker. Pre-recorded presentations, body doubles for photographs, colleagues who assume you're there because your name is on the schedule. I flew back Tuesday night on a private jet, handled the situation, then returned to San Francisco before anyone noticed I was gone. The perfect crime, undone by a dog's perfect memory. Dr. Adrian Blackwood's arrest made headlines across Los Angeles, but the true story, how a German shepherd's testimony had solved the case, captured international attention. Legal experts debated the admissibility of animal behavioral evidence, while animal psychologists praised the breakthrough in interspecies communication. Detective Reyes stood in the courthouse steps after Blackwood's arraignment, watching Rex play with a tennis ball in the small park across the street. The dog had adapted to his temporary life at the police station, becoming an unofficial mascot while arrangements were made for his permanent placement. So what happens to our star witness? Officer Morrison asked, following her gaze. He's coming home with me, Reyes replied. Seemed like the right thing to do. Rex solved this case as much as we did. But as they walked toward her car, Reyes's phone buzzed with a text message that would add one final twist to the case. It was from the prosecutor's office forwarding a message that had been found in Blackwood's personal effects during his booking. The message was addressed to Marcus Thornfield and dated 3 weeks before. The murder. It wasn't from Blackwood, it was to Blackwood, and it changed everything they thought they knew about the case. Adrian, the message read, I know what you did to David Chen. The poisoning you made looked like a heart attack. I have proof. We need to discuss how this affects our partnership and your freedom. Marcus David Chen, Thomas Chen's older brother, a researcher who had died mysteriously 2 years earlier while working on a competing brain interface project. His death had been ruled natural causes, but now it appeared Marcus Thornfield had discovered the truth. Blackwood wasn't just protecting the Neuralink project, Reyes realized. He was protecting himself from a murder charge. Thornfield was blackmailing him. The revelation cast Blackwood's confession in a different light. He hadn't killed Thornfield to prevent the weaponization of their research. He had killed him to avoid exposure for a previous murder. The noble motive he had claimed was just another layer of deception from a man who had been killing to protect his secrets for years. Rex, oblivious to these human complications, continued playing with his tennis ball. His testimony had solved not just one murder, but potentially 2. The dog who couldn't lie had exposed a killer who couldn't stop lying even when caught. As Reyes drove home with her new companion, she reflected on the case that had challenged everything she thought she knew about witnesses, evidence and truth. Sometimes the most reliable testimony came from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes justice had 4 legs and an unshakable loyalty to the truth. In the rearview mirror, she could see Rex watching the courthouse disappear behind them, his tail wagging slightly as if he understood that his job was finally complete. The perfect witness had delivered perfect justice, proving that in a world full of deception, honesty could still be found in the most unlikely places. The case was closed, but Rex's legacy would endure, forever changing how investigators viewed the silent witnesses who saw everything and remembered it all.